The pharmacy was almost quiet that Tuesday afternoon. Just the soft beep of the register, the hum of the heating unit, and the sound of a woman doing her job with the kind of calm that only comes from doing it perfectly for a very long time. Michelle had been at counter 3 since 8 that morning. She had memorized dosages, flagged drug interactions, settled billing disputes, and translated medical language into plain English for people who were too frightened to ask twice. She had done all of it without being asked. She had done all of it without being thanked. She was in the middle of a call with an insurance office when the woman in the expensive coat walked up. The woman set her prescription on the counter with the quiet authority of someone who had never been told to wait. Michelle held up one finger, one moment. She finished the call. She turned, she smiled. What happened next took less than 60 seconds. But the silence it left behind lasted much longer. If you have ever worked twice as hard to be seen half as clearly, stay right here. This story was made for you. And if it moves you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Because the woman in that coat thought she was speaking to a pharmacy technician behind a counter. She had no way of knowing she was speaking to someone who had spent 7 years saving lives in a hospital on the other side of the world. She had no way of knowing that the woman she was telling to speak proper English had forgotten more about medicine than most people in that room would ever learn. And she had absolutely no way of knowing who was standing directly behind her. The fluorescent light above counter 3 had been flickering for 11 days. Michelle Davis had submitted the maintenance request twice. She had written the ticket number on a sticky note and placed it inside the manager's binder, which sat beside the register like a small monument to things that never quite got done. The light kept flickering. She had stopped noticing it the way you stop noticing the hum of a refrigerator. It had become part of the frequency of the place, and she had learned long ago how to build a life inside frequencies that were not designed for her. It was a Tuesday in February, the kind of Tuesday that Columbus, Ohio produces in that month with a specific and dedicated cruelty. The sky was the color of old dishwater. The air was so dry it cracks your lips between the parking lot and the door. The pharmacy counter at MedPlus Drugs on Morse Road sat at the back of the store, past the greeting cards and the seasonal candy, which was still Christmas candy marked down to 60% off, even though Christmas had been 6 weeks ago. Michelle had straightened those shelves twice during her 15-minute break. She did that. She noticed things that were wrong and fixed them quietly without being asked. And no one ever noticed that either. It was 4:47 in the afternoon. The after-work rush was beginning to thicken. Michelle could tell the density of a pharmacy line by sound alone. She knew the particular quality of impatient silence. She knew the way a person's weight shifts when they have decided the line is moving too slowly. She had been on her feet since 8 that morning. She had eaten half a container of jollof rice that she had packed in her purple insulated bag, standing up during a gap between customers. She'd eaten it fast enough that she barely tasted it, which was a shame because she had made it the night before with the good long grain rice and the tomatoes she had roasted herself, and it deserved better than to be eaten standing over a trash can in 11 minutes. She was processing a prior authorization, the third one that afternoon, a call that had been bouncing between the insurance company and a prescribing physician's office for 40 minutes. When Linda Leva arrived at the counter, Michelle did not see her approach. She heard her first. The particular percussion of expensive shoes on linoleum. Linda set her prescription slip on the counter with the flat and definitive gesture of someone who expected objects to obey her. She was perhaps 55, wearing a camel coat that cost more than Michelle's car payment. She carried the particular expression of a person who had been mildly inconvenienced every single day of her life and had decided collectively to treat every interaction as a referendum on that inconvenience. Michelle held up one finger and finished the sentence she was speaking to the insurance representatives on the phone. Politely, precisely. She gave the authorization code and the provider identification number from memory because she had memorized it, because she memorized everything she needed to get through a day in this place. She hung up. She turned to Linda. She smiled. "Good afternoon." How can I help you?" Linda looked at her, not at her face exactly, past it. "I need this filled, and I need it in 30 minutes because I have somewhere to be." Michelle looked at the slip. It was for a controlled substance. The dosage written on it was different from the dosage on file. A small difference, but not the kind of difference you passed over. She would need to call the physician's office to confirm. She explained this calmly with the measured professional language she had spent years assembling like a second skeleton worn over her own. Linda stared at her. "I am sorry," Linda said, not sounding sorry at all. "Can I speak to someone else? I am having trouble understanding you." The store went slightly quieter, not silent. The store was never fully silent, but the ambient noise dropped a register. The way it does when enough people in a space simultaneously decide to listen to something. Michelle looked at her. Her hands were flat on the counter. "I understand you perfectly," she said, "and I have explained the situation clearly. The dosage on this prescription does not match what we have on file. That is a safety protocol. I need to confirm with the prescribing physician before I can proceed." "I heard what you said." Linda's voice had acquired an edge, the kind of edge that had practice behind it. "I just think you would be more helpful if you spoke more clearly, spoke proper English. You know what I mean?" The light above counter 3 flickered. In the line behind Linda, 3 people stood waiting. A young man in scrubs looking at his phone, a teenager with headphones around his neck, and a woman in her late 50s, in a dark blazer over gray slacks, carrying a single prescription bag and a leather portfolio. She'd been standing there long enough to have heard everything. She looked at Michelle, and Michelle, who had built a career out of not letting her face show what her chest was doing, looked back at Linda and began the physician callback process with the same quiet efficiency she brought to everything. But something in her hands was not quiet. If you had been watching closely, you would have seen it. The way her left hand, just for a moment, pressed flat against the counter with the specific and invisible effort of a person who is deciding very deliberately not to become what someone else is trying to make her. The woman in the dark blazer looked at the room. Then she looked at Michelle. Then she said it, quietly, without heat, without performance, the way you state a fact that has simply been gotten wrong. "She is a pharmacist." 4 words, and the room went still. Before we continue, let us know in the comment section where in the world you are tuning in from. We love seeing how far our stories reach. And if this story speaks to you, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe. Her full name was Michelle Adwoa Davis. She was 44 years old. She had been born in Accra, Ghana, in a neighborhood called Labone, in a house with a yellow gate and a mango tree in the back courtyard that her father had planted the year she was born, and that her mother still sat beneath on Sunday mornings. She had left Accra in 2014. She had been 32 years old. She had a master's degree in clinical pharmacy from Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology in Kumasi, and she had practiced for 7 years. First as a hospital pharmacist at Korlebu Teaching Hospital, and then running a small community dispensary in the Dansoman district that served nearly 4,000 people. She had known her patients. She had known their children's names. She had known which elderly man would come in on the second Monday of every month for his blood pressure medication, and which teenage girl was too embarrassed to ask directly for what she actually needed, and how to handle both conversations without making either of them feel small. She had a small brass mortar and pestle that her father had given her the day she passed her pharmacy board examinations. It was not large. It fit inside 2 cupped hands. It was heavier than it looked because it was solid and old, the kind of thing that had been used for actual compounding before compounding became industrial. Her father had used it as a paperweight for years. He died the year she left Ghana, 3 months before she got on the plane. She had wrapped the mortar and pestle in a piece of kente cloth and placed it at the very bottom of her second suitcase, below everything else. The way you place the most important thing in the center of everything you are afraid might be taken from you. She had come to Ohio because her college friend Abina was here. Abina had said, "Come, Michelle, it is possible. You will get your license revalidated within 2 years. I know a woman who did it in 18 months. So Michelle had sold her car and liquidated her small savings account and brought her daughter Alexandria, who was 3 years old and had her father's eyes, across an ocean to a city where the winter lasted 5 months, and the light when it came sideways and brief and apologetic. The revalidation process had not taken 18 months. It had been explained to her in language so bureaucratic it required its own translation, that her foreign pharmacy degree needed to undergo credential certification, which required documentation she had to request from Ghana, which required time, which cost money. Then there were licensing examinations, application fees, and internship hours that had to be completed under supervision, even though she had supervised others for 7 years. And there was a period during which she was not permitted to practice at all, which meant a period during which her decade of expertise had no economic value whatsoever. She had found the technician job at MedPlus in 2015. She had taken it because Alexandria needed new shoes and the deposit on the apartment on Carl Road was due. She had told herself she would stay 6 months. She had stayed 9 years. She made $22.40 an hour after taxes and the health insurance premium and the $60 a week she put into Alexandria's college fund. She sent $350 home to her mother every month, reliably on the 3rd of the month through the Western Union on Morse Road, 2 blocks from the pharmacy. Her mother received it and bought the blood pressure medication that the public clinic never had in stock, and paid the school fees for Michelle's brother Emmanuel's youngest daughter, who was 11 years old and excellent at mathematics. Alexandria was 13 now. She went by Alex at school, not because she had chosen to erase anything, but because the full name got mispronounced so consistently and with such cheerful confidence that by 5th grade she had decided life was too short. At home, with Michelle, she was always Alexandria. She helped with translations sometimes at the DMV or at parent-teacher conferences when the conversation became fast and full of coded social language that every American institution uses instead of saying what it actually means. She did these translations matter-of-factly, without condescension, the way a person hands someone an umbrella because it is raining, not because they think the other person does not know what rain is. Michelle kept the mortar and pestle wrapped in the kente cloth on the top shelf of her bedroom closet behind the spare blankets. She did not display it. If you had asked her why, she would have said she was afraid it would get broken. But the apartment was small and clean and careful, and nothing in it had ever been broken. She had been told before she came that America was a meritocracy, that the work you did was the thing that defined you, and that good work, consistent work, work done with skill and dedication would be seen and would rise. She had believed this with the specific and disciplined faith of a person who has staked everything on a belief and cannot afford for it to be wrong. And the unexpected, beautiful thing, the thing no one had told her about, was the public library, the Columbus Metropolitan Library on Grant Avenue specifically. She had discovered it in her first winter when Alexandria was small and the apartment was cold because they had not yet understood how to properly regulate American radiators. She had walked in purely for warmth and found a room of such unhurried abundance, books in every language, a children's section where Alexandria could be loud without consequence, and librarians who treated every question as if it deserved a serious answer. She had stood in the middle of it and felt something she had not expected to feel in Ohio in January. She had felt peace. She still went on Friday evenings. She went alone for 1 hour after her shift. And before she picked Alexandria up from her father's house, a man who was no longer in either of their lives in any meaningful way, she sat in the periodical section and read. For that 1 hour, she was not a pharmacy technician or an immigrant or a remittance sender or a single mother. She was just a woman who liked to read. She had earned that. Linda Leva did not leave quietly. The physician's office put Michelle on hold for 6 minutes. During those 6 minutes, Linda sighed twice, checked her phone once, and made a deliberate throat-clearing sound that registered impatience without saying a word. Michelle absorbed it without acknowledgement. When the office came back on the line, they confirmed that the dosage on the prescription was correct. The prescribing physician had amended the patient's regimen at the most recent appointment, and the system had not yet been updated, a common issue. Michelle thanked them, made the notation in the file, and told Linda her prescription would be ready in 25 minutes. "That is all this was?" Linda said. "Just a phone call?" "That is what the safety process requires," Michelle said evenly. Linda picked up her ticket number and stepped aside without another word. The woman in the dark blazer moved forward to the counter. She set down her prescription bag, a pickup, not a drop-off, and she looked at Michelle with the calm and direct gaze of a person who is accustomed to saying exactly what she means. "She is a pharmacist." She said it the way you correct a record, not loudly, not for attention. The words settled into the room like stones dropped into still water, and the ripples moved outward quietly and without stopping. Linda Leva, 10 feet away at the pickup window, went very still. The young man in scrubs looked up from his phone. The teenager with the headphones turned his head. The woman in the dark blazer was looking at Michelle when she said it, not at Linda, at Michelle, as though the words were meant first for her. Michelle pulled up the woman's prescription record. The name on the file was Dr. Carrie Prince. Carrie Prince came back the following Thursday. She had run out of her medication sooner than expected, and she came in at 6:15 in the evening, just before closing, when the line was short and the fluorescent light above counter 3 was, at last, no longer flickering. The maintenance request had finally been addressed. Michelle had noticed the exact moment it stopped, the way you notice when a sound you have grown used to suddenly goes absent. Michelle recognized Carrie before she reached the counter. The posture first, upright in a way that was habitual rather than effortful. The posture of a person who had spent decades walking into rooms that expected something from her. Then the blazer, different in color but the same quiet quality. Then the face. "Dr. Prince?" Michelle said. Carrie paused. "You remembered my name." "I remember all the patients on my files," Michelle said. There was a small beat, a moment that would later feel significant. "Those are the same thing, are they not?" Carrie said. It was not quite a question. Michelle pulled up the file. She processed the refill. She checked the interaction profile. Carrie was on 4 medications, and a recent addition flagged a mild interaction that required a note. Not dangerous, but the kind of thing that needed to be explained properly. Michelle explained it properly. She used the clinical language naturally because she had never stopped thinking in it, and then she translated it into the practical language of someone who was not a clinician, walking Carrie through what to watch for and when. Carrie listened the way people who are actually listening listen. Not waiting for a pause to speak, receiving. "Where did you study?" Carrie asked. The question came so directly that Michelle's answer came before she could arrange it. "KNUST, in Kumasi, clinical pharmacy." She paused. "In Ghana." "How long did you practice?" 7 years. She handed Carrie the bag. Before I came here?" Carrie took the bag and did not move away from the counter. She looked at Michelle with the particular attention of someone standing in front of a door and deciding whether to open it. My daughter will not speak to me, Carrie said quietly. I thought you should know that. Michelle looked at her. She did not know why Carrie Prince had said this at a pharmacy counter at 6:20 in the evening. She suspected Carrie did not entirely know either. I am sorry, Michelle said. We have not spoken in 2 years. I was always working. I thought that was what providing meant. I thought if I worked hard enough, everything else would take care of itself. Carrie looked at the prescription bag in her hand. You know what that is? Do you not? She said it quietly. And Michelle did know. She had been carrying it for 9 years without ever hearing it named by someone outside her own chest. The way that love, when it is expressed entirely as sacrifice, becomes invisible to the person it is meant for. The way you can give everything and still somehow give the other person the feeling that you were never truly there. Yes, Michelle said, I know exactly what that is. If you are enjoying this story, please hit that like button and subscribe for more emotional tales that touch the heart. We would also love to hear from you. Leave a comment below telling us whether you have ever had someone speak up for you in a moment when you could not speak up for yourself. Or maybe you were the one who finally said something. Let us know. Now let us continue. It was Michelle who suggested the tea. And she would not entirely understand why, except that Carrie Prince had the look of a person who had been taking care of everyone else for so long, she had forgotten that she had a body of her own. The pharmacy closed at 7. The manager, Darren, a 29-year-old man who liked Michelle and was slightly afraid of her and had never fully understood why, let her use the break room's electric kettle and the small table near the window that looked out onto the parking lot. Carrie Prince sat across from Michelle in the break room at 7:15 on a Thursday evening and drank tea that Michelle had brought from home. It was an herbal blend her mother sent in small vacuum-sealed packets twice a year, hibiscus and dried ginger and a leaf whose English name Michelle had never looked up because the Twi name was sufficient. Carrie held the cup. She breathed it in slowly. What is this? Something my mother makes. She grows the hibiscus herself. Michelle sat down. She sends it so I do not forget what home smells like. Carrie was quiet. Then she asked, Does it work? Michelle considered this the way she considered clinical questions. Not quickly, not to fill silence, because it deserved a real answer. No, she said, but it is a good kind of not working. You smell it and you think of home, and then you think about how far away home is, and then you feel both things at once, the missing and the here. She wrapped her hands around her cup. After a while, you stop wanting to choose between them. Carrie nodded slowly. Something was moving in her face that she was not managing as well as she usually managed things. My daughter's name is Caitlin, she said. She lives in Portland. She is 31. She is a ceramicist. She said the word with the careful deliberateness of a person who had recently learned to say it without judgment in it, because they had first said it with judgment and paid a price. When she told me that was her path, I asked her what the income projections were. She set her cup down. She stopped speaking to me for 6 months. I told myself she was being dramatic. Now I think she was protecting herself. Alexandria arrived at 7:40. She had a key and she had texted her mother twice, a habit she had developed not because Michelle asked, but because she had learned, quietly, that knowing where her mother was mattered. She came through the back, saw her mother sitting with a woman she did not recognize, and stopped in the doorway. Mom! Come, Alexandria. This is Dr. Prince. She is an oncologist. Alexandria processed this with the particular social intelligence of a child raised between cultures. She crossed the room and shook Carrie's hand. Alexandria, Carrie said, is that a family name? Alexandria's expression shifted, just slightly. The small recalibration of someone who's been seen in a way they did not expect. It is from my grandmother's side, back in Ghana. It is a strong name, Carrie said simply. Alexandria looked at her mother. Michelle was watching her daughter with the expression she wore when she did not know she was being watched. A love so structural, it was more like architecture than emotion. "Mom, can I get one of the biscuits you packed?" "They are in the bag. Get one. Only one." Alexandria rummaged, found two, took both, and stepped back with her phone out. St. Carrie watched her. Something was crossing her face that she was not controlling. "She looks like you," Carrie said when Alexandria had moved away. "She has my father's eyes," Michelle said. "My father died the year we came here, 3 months before we left Ghana." She said it without preamble, in the matter-of-fact tone of a person who has absorbed a loss so fully they can state it without letting it destroy the conversation. "I still think sometimes that he would have liked Columbus, he liked parks, he liked green places." Carrie was very still. "Michelle," Carrie said, and it was the first time she had used the name, and the use of it changed something in the air between them. "What would you be doing right now if you were still in Ghana?" Michelle looked at her hands. "Running my dispensary," she said. "I would probably know your mother's name if you had a mother in Dansoman. I would know what she needed before she could ask." A pause. "I would know what you needed before you could ask." She said it without self-pity, the way you say a true thing, simply because it is true. Carrie reached across the table and placed her hand over Michelle's hand for exactly 3 seconds. It was not a grand gesture. It was the gesture of a woman who had spent 30 years learning to be precise about what people needed, extending that precision now to something that was not clinical at all. Michelle did not pull back. When they left the break room 20 minutes later, stepping into a parking lot where the February air had gone from cruel to simply cold, Alexandria walked between them, eating her second biscuit, talking about a science project involving water filtration systems with the confident and spiraling enthusiasm of a 13-year-old who has found an adult who will actually listen. Carrie listened, fully, the way she had once listened to patients before the work of accumulation had made her distant from the reason she had started. The letter arrived on a Monday. Michelle found it in the mail slot at 7:30 in the evening after a 10-hour shift. She was holding a grocery bag in one hand and her keys in the other. The return address was the Ohio State Board of Pharmacy, and the letterhead was formal in the way that formal letterheads are when they carry news that changes the shape of your day. It was not an acceptance, it was a denial. The third denial of her application for license equivalency review. The reason given was insufficient documentation of supervised clinical hours in a United States-based setting. The letter noted that she could reapply with supplementary evidence within 90 days. Language that sounded like an option but was structured like a wall. She read it twice in the hallway, then she put the groceries in the refrigerator. She did not tell Alexandria she cooked dinner, fried plantains and rice and Contamire stew methodically, because cooking was something she could control. She ate with her daughter and asked about school and laughed at a joke that deserved a laugh. After Alexandria went to bed, she sat at the kitchen table with the letter in front of her, and she felt the specific and structural despair of a person who has done every right thing and found again a door that opens onto a wall. She had not told Carrie about the application. She had not told anyone. She had not told anyone because telling people created the risk of pity, and pity in Michelle's internal architecture was indistinguishable from condescension. She had crossed an ocean to need nothing. She was not about to start now. Carrie found out because Darren told her. Darren, who was 29 and afraid of Michelle and liked her, had been making calls to the board on his own, not exactly on her behalf, just asking questions. The way people who work alongside competence long enough sometimes begin to understand what they are standing next to. He mentioned it casually to Carrie, who had come in for her monthly refill, and asked how Michelle was. Carrie arrived at the pharmacy the following Thursday with her leather portfolio under her arm. She did not come to the counter. She waited until Michelle's lunch break. She sat across from her in the break room and she opened the portfolio and she said, "I know the director of clinical training at Ohio Health's pharmacy residency program. I've also spoken to 2 people on the board's equivalency review committee. There is a pathway. It is not the one you have been using." Michelle looked at the documents. "I do not need," she started. "I know you do not need it," Carrie said. Her voice was steady and direct and entirely without condescension. "That is not why I am doing this." She paused. "I am doing this because a woman who has been practicing clinical pharmacy for 17 years, 7 in Ghana and 9 in this store, should not be handing people their medications in a paper bag. She should be counseling patients on their treatment plans. That is just medicine. It has nothing to do with need." Michelle was silent. Outside the break room window, the parking lot was wet from an afternoon drizzle, and the lights of passing cars made long liquid shapes across the asphalt. "There is a supervised internship," Carrie continued. 12 weeks at Grant Hospital. I can facilitate the introduction. It counts toward the supplementary clinical hours. She closed the portfolio and met Michelle's eyes. "The application deadline is the 8th of next month. You could have your license by August." August. Michelle thought about that. In August, Alexandria would be 14. In August, her father would have been 71. "Why are you doing this?" Michelle asked. Not defensively, genuinely. Carrie was quiet for a moment. "Because I spent 30 years taking care of strangers and I did not notice that my daughter had become a stranger to me." She looked at her hands. "And because I watched someone stand behind a counter and absorb something no one should ever have to absorb. And the only thing I said, the only thing I was willing to do in that moment was 4 words, and that was not enough." She looked at Michelle. "This is closer to enough." The room was very still. Michelle thought about the letter on the kitchen table. She thought about her mother sitting under the mango tree on Sunday mornings, receiving $350 on the 3rd of the month as evidence that her daughter was fine, that the plan was working, that the distance was worth it. She thought about Linda Leva and the weight of absorbing that without flinching. The energy it cost, the energy she had been spending daily for 9 years on the invisible work of making herself small enough to pass without friction through a world that had not been built with her in mind. She thought about Alexandria, born with her grandmother's name, who shook hands with strangers with the confidence of a girl who did not yet know what it costs to move through the world the way she moved through it. She wanted to give her daughter that confidence as an inheritance. An inheritance required living the thing first. You could not hand your child something you had never allowed yourself to hold. She had spent 10 years making herself smaller so others could feel larger. She would not do it today. "The 8th of next month," Michelle said. "I will send you the contact tonight," Carrie said. The internship began in April, Tuesdays and Thursdays 5 to 8 in the evening at the clinical pharmacy unit of Grant Hospital under the supervision of a department head named Dr. Mary Jones, who had come from Lagos 17 years ago and had gotten her own license validated after a process that had taken 3 years and had required everything she had. She shook Michelle's hand on the first evening and looked at her for a long moment and said, "You are going to be fine. You are better than fine. You are just late." The board approved the supplementary documentation in July. The license came in August in the second week on a Tuesday via standard mail in a white envelope that was wholly unequal to its contents. Michelle opened it at the kitchen table. Alexandria was at the refrigerator, conducting some negotiation between leftover rice and the possibility of also having cereal. Michelle read the letter once, she read it again, she set it down and sat very still. Alexandria looked at her. She closed the refrigerator. She came to the table and read the letter, because she could read it, because she was 13 and brilliant and had sat beside her mother through enough paperwork over the years to understand what licensing meant. "Mom," she said. Michelle was not crying, but she was not crying either. She was in that specific register between the two, the one that Alexandria had seen before but not often, the one that meant something had moved in her mother that did not often move. Alexandria sat down beside her. She did not say anything else. She just sat there with their arms touching, while the kitchen smelled of last night's stew and the evening light came through the window at its sideways August angle. For a while, neither of them needed to speak at all. That evening, after dinner, after Alexandria had gone to her room, Michelle went to her bedroom closet. She moved the spare blankets aside. She found the mortar and pestle in its kente cloth wrapping, dense and solid and small and heavier than it looked. She carried it to the kitchen. She unwrapped it slowly, folding the kente cloth and setting it to one side. She placed the brass mortar and pestle on the kitchen counter between the electric kettle and the fruit bowl where the morning light would find it. She stood back and looked at it. It looked right. It looked like it had always belonged there, which was the same thing as belonging. She called her mother the next morning, before her shift, before Alexandria was awake. Sitting at the kitchen table with the mortar and pestle in the corner of her vision and a cup of her mother's hibiscus tea warming her hands, she called Accra. Her mother answered on the second ring, the way she always answered when it was Michelle, because she kept the phone close. "Michelle, Mame," she breathed. Outside, Columbus was beginning its morning. The light was coming up clean and honest. "Things are good." She had said those words before, on 100 calls, in 100 different states of tired and held together by willpower alone. They had always been partly true and partly the thing you say so the person you love most does not spend their Sunday worrying about you. This time they were simply true, all the way through, without remainder. Her mother said something in Twi that meant, approximately, "I know, I always knew." Then she said in the easy and digressive way of a woman who has not seen her daughter in 3 years but speaks to her every week, "The mango tree has been doing beautifully this year. Your father's tree. Your brother took a photograph. I will send it." Michelle held the phone with both hands. "Send it," she said. "I will show Alexandria." Michelle Davis had come to this country with a brass mortar and pestle, a 3-year-old daughter, and a decade of expertise that no wall she walked through was willing to recognize. She had been told in 1,000 different ways by paperwork and silence and camel coat, women and flickering lights and forms that asked for things that had no answer in her life, that she was temporary, that she was a problem to be processed, that her worth was conditional on how easily she could be made to disappear. But she had known something those people did not. She had left her father's house and her mother's tree and 7 years of patients who trusted her and a city that had held the shape of who she was. And she had crossed water and borders and grief and February in Ohio to get here. She had already survived the hardest part. Everything after that was just learning to take up the space that had always belonged to her. Thank you so much for watching. If this story touched your heart, please give it a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more incredible stories of resilience, sacrifice, and the quiet dignity of people who gave everything to build something new. Drop a comment below and let us know what you thought. We read every single one.